put him on his back. Thurston, right foot kick, down the ground, into the in goal almost. Hodgson cuts it off. Hodgson taken by Norton. He took him late. Marshall skips away. Marshall's still going. Marshall's got Richards coming up outside. Now inside. Richards pursued. He pushes Johnson away.
Good evening, everybody. It is Tuesday, 16th of April, 2024. You're back for another episode of the Tiger Town podcast with your hosts, Zac and Toby. I'm on this end, Toby's on the other end. As always, brought to you by Best On Ground Digital, bestongrounddigital.com, the digital marketing agency that looks after the little guys. They support us, we support them. Anything digital related or marketing related, or the two, contact them. bestongrounddigital.com. They will not steer you wrong. I just got it out, mate. How are you doing this eve?
Yeah, good, mate. Didn't know if anyone else could see, but I think my screen froze for a second there. I don't know, maybe my internet's been a little bit how you going, but yeah, mate, not bad. Look, brought back down to earth on Sunday, which was frustrating to watch and frustrating to, I guess, participate in somewhat. But you know, it's only a game. We have to keep telling ourselves it was only a game.
Yeah, mate. 24-12, obviously, on Sunday afternoon at a sold-out or near sold-out Campbell Town Stadium. Very, very disappointing for a number of reasons, and we're going to dive deep into that this evening, I should say. So, mate, just very briefly, how would you sum up that game in a sentence or two?
Poor. I don't even need a sentence. I can do it in one word, and poor. It was as if the Tigers of the last 2 years were back. There was no fire, there was no aggression, there was no cohesion. They looked lost at times, no direction, and it was by far Appy's worst game in a Tigers jersey.
Yeah, it was funny. I think there's a few people that had pretty average games in Tigers jerseys. For me, it can be pretty much summed up in that first couple of minutes. Obviously, the Dragons scored off the back of it, but that first hit up from Steph, it just didn't look the way that it has.
He ran sideways.
Yeah, exactly. And he had a couple of okay hit-ups a bit later on, but as we'll get to a bit later in the show, his output was down, and that, I don't know, it was odd at the start of the game to see that for the very first carry, considering the player that he's been. And from there, I wouldn't say it exactly spiced up at all. We were flat out of the gates. And there was a moment or two briefly during the game, but to be perfectly honest, mate, it looked like they'd all been laid up with influenza for the week. That's how flat they looked. And if you want a recipe on how to take a sold-out crowd out of the game as soon as possible, that was it.
That's it. Oh, by far. I have no idea what it is about Campbell Town and us at the moment. We just do not perform there. I think it's been a very long time since we put a good showing on there. And what is it with us and big occasions as well? So if we're remembering a great that's put on the jersey or something like that. So obviously, talking about Barnesy on, the passing of Barnesy, and we had a little bit of a moment's silence and everything like that. A perfect opportunity to lift. Probably Keith Barnes, one of the greatest Tigers players that's ever been around or ever been, played for the jersey, whatever have you. And we just couldn't lift. And then you think about maybe 2 years ago when Tommy died, and we had the opportunity at Leichhardt to, fulfill his memory or, whatever I'm trying to say. This is how frustrated I am with it because I can't even get the words out. And we got booed off at halftime because of that. What is it about the Tigers and these big occasions? They just can't rise to them.
It goes beyond that. I can think back to when Robbie Farah's mum passed away and the emotion around that day. I can think back to a sold-out Leichhardt against the Sharks where simply a win would have got us into the 8 after what at the time was a long drought and just got blown off the park. It's in the walls, mate. There's just losing in the walls, and That's going to take a very long time to fix. It's funny because you do often see a lot of other teams lift for these types of occasions. You know, the Knights on their old boys' day, for example, is a classic example. You don't want to play them at McDonald Jones Stadium on their old boys' day because they become near on unbeatable. And there's a raft of other examples that you could think of. I just can't at the moment, where other teams use emotion effectively. We're terrible at it. And you add that to, as you said, you know, the moment's silence for the passing of Keith Barnes, Golden Boots, a Balmain legend, sorry. You look at the fact that Campbell Town Stadium was sold out for the first time in near on sold out, sorry. Bold prediction tick, by the way. But near on 20 years, and that's the performance they put in. It was head scratching, it was baffling, and it was almost to a man. They looked flat. There was hardly a player out there for the duration of the game where you thought that person's on. Even Olam, who runs the ball hard, had moments where it just didn't look like he was interested at certain snippets. And I only pick him because he, in some ways, is a bit of a barometer, and he seems like he doesn't have an off switch. He still ran the ball hard, and I'm not singling him out for that purpose. But yeah, across the board, we just looked flat out of the gates.
Yeah, there's only one person that really comes to mind who I can say just looked like he could potentially be the difference maker, and that was Junior Tupou. I think he was the only one that seemed to run with purpose. And I'm putting all the forwards in that. I mean, right now, and, you know, I'm not sure how many minutes he played, which I'm looking at right now, but I'm looking at the stats. And whether he was injured or what happened, Polo ran for 44 metres.
Yeah, played 27 minutes.
That did not even crack the 50.
Yeah.
Like, you had, you know, somebody who, you know, has been probably criticised a fair bit, and sometimes it's been justified, but Bud Sullivan ran for almost 100. And you had a forward that ran for 44. So, you know, you said last week that he just looked tired. He looked exhausted. You might have been right. You might have been right. You might have been he's burnt out. And that's very concerning, given we're in round 5 or 6.
Not only did we look flat, but, I mean, the discipline, mate, like fair dinkum. I don't know what is going on at the moment in terms of how we're being nitpicked for little things, but and I'm not going to harp on about the refs. I thought Atkins was reasonable. I thought there was bad decisions that went. I thought there was bad decisions that went both ways. To be perfectly honest, and the reason I say that is that there was the clear one where we knocked on, and we got the ball back off the Dragons in the second half. Second half,
yeah, whenever that was. I know
first half, the end of the first half, yeah, or middle end of the first half. But
they'd already lost their challenge by then too, hadn't they?
Yeah, so I'm not going to bring the refs into this because, bottom line, if you look at things like ruck interference or hand on the ball or being offside when you're in their 40, which you were correct the other week, sorry, it is a penalty, obviously, inside the 40, as opposed to a 6 again. I just brushed over that. I don't know if you noticed. I just really quickly just pushed that to the side.
Then I was right. Thanks.
Yeah, first time for everything. Look, then they're not going to blow those penalties if you are not offside. You know, what we're really whinging about is the need to blow a penalty for what we might deem to be a marginal call. But don't make it marginal. I was thinking about it only this afternoon once again. This team, in all 5 games that it's played, 2 wins, 3 losses, have shot themselves in the foot at the start of all 5 games. They've been slow starters in all 5 games. So to come out what seemed flat and then to continue to shoot yourselves in the foot, not only with those set restarts and penalties, at one stage it was getting to the comedic. And obviously I wasn't seeing the funny side of it, more the Shakespearean comedic, as in murders and things, you know, a bit more. I'm
not cultured. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Oh, you're a bit of a Hamlet, mate. But it was the errors as well. It was just, and I know the Dragons made a few, and thank God they did. But just, you know, it was Seafarth just dropping the ball cold. It was Bud Sullivan throwing a nothing pass to Fatape hospital ball, who drops the ball because Sully's first play off a scrum. It was just that for what seemed like the vast majority of the game. What I will say, though, and this is something that not a lot of people that I've heard or read have picked up on, we were one awful bounce away from that being 3 tries apiece that game. After
the kick to Staines, yeah.
After that kick to Staines, which almost any other bounce, he's that far in front of Ravalawa that he picks up and goes. Like that's a pretty fair chance there. That we're not talking about a low percentage play. That's a pretty fair chance. The kick was on point. Off the back of that, they go down and Lomax out jumps Buller to score, or to pass it on, to Flanagan, who was offside off the kick, by the way, to score the try. He was as well. But as bad as we were, as flat as we were, as poor as our discipline continues to be, as frustratingly slow as our starts have been in all 5 of these games, we were still only, like I said, 1 bounce away from being 3 tries apiece. If you want a silver lining, it's the fact that we were awful, to be perfectly honest. We were awful for maybe 76 minutes of that game, and maybe I'm being generous. We barely played a good patch of football. We were missing our vice-captain, and probably it would be tough to argue, despite their young age, 2 of our best 3 to 5 players in Samuela and obviously Lockie Galvin. So we were missing key personnel who have made a difference to our side this year, and we were disgusting, and we were that close. If you want a silver lining, there's one. But mate, the slow starts are a massive concern to me. And I could keep going through a bunch of concerns, but I'll throw that to you. Is that something you've picked up on? Because we can't. God almighty, mate, we can't keep doing it.
No, 100%. And this was something that I flagged with you when we were talking about the Dolphins game last week. It was very similar to the Eagles game prior. I think we were pretty fast starters against the Sharks. I think that's probably the only game where we've actually come out with a bit of a winded our backs kind of mentality.
I'm going to say no. And sorry to interrupt. The reason I'm saying no, they scored first. So they scored first, and it took us, 15, 20 minutes to get over?
They scored first after how many sets on our line?
That's what I'm saying. What put them on our line? Discipline. So when I'm saying slow starts, I'm saying we're giving teams ample ball through discipline and errors and whatnot, and just shooting ourselves in the foot. And we've conceded the first points in every single game.
Yeah, fair. Well, yeah.
That's right.
Now we can lump that in there now that you've kind of, put a bit of a point on that. But, I will say if we played any other team but the Dragons, because the Dragons weren't good either. The Dragons, if they didn't have Lomax in that team, and that was one of the ones, again, like I said, he's been on fire and definitely one that concerned me. And then the other one that concerned me went for a Bullock-in run over as well in Sewer. But if they didn't have Lomax in that team, they probably would have been just as bad as we were, because they were not good. No. They were basically that game looked like whoever is worse is going to lose. It's not who's better, it's who's worse. If we played any other team, bar probably the Titans, we would have got absolutely smoked. They would have 50.
The other thing to remember as well is that none of their tries came from good structure or setup, bar maybe the first one. But you could argue that was a standard sweep that we just got horribly wrong in the second minute. Justin Olam is sitting in Bud Sullivan's pocket. That was awful.
That comes down to trust too. Again,
yeah, exactly right. And I was going to go to that a bit later. But outside of that, I mean, the try they scored. Who scored that try? The one where they had a series of offloads, which was again. Off the back of 2 forward passes, might I add, which Jacob Little, hello, how many forward passes that bloke throw? Far out. They didn't call, I think they called 1. Anyway, beside the point. Offloads hitting the ground, fumbling around. They scored a try off Lomax jumping over Buller, as I mentioned before, which is, how many times is that going to happen where you take it clean, you regain your feet, and you manage to pop apart? There was nothing in the Dragons that was scary in attack. They played a good power game, but in terms of structure and whatnot, Ben Hunt wasn't contributing to any sleek or silkiness. They just took
No.
a few extra chances and they came off for them, and lo and behold, there they were.
Yeah. Well, this is like you said, that bumbling, there was a lock, Eisenhuth picked the ball off the ground with his fingertips. How many locks can do that? Especially someone that's not probably a lock. Eisenhuth's more of a prop. And that's it. Like, they had less chances, but it just seemed like everything stuck for them as well when it needed to. But again, that's not saying that, luck was the only reason they won. They won because they were the less shit team.
And they were, and they took their chances. And you know what the Dragons didn't do? The Dragons didn't give us every opportunity. We just kept giving them chances. Like I said, I think it was 4 consecutive sets they were coming out of their end in the second half. Second half, I think. It was definitely the second half, where we just gave them a penalty inside the 40. I think it was 4 in a row.
Yeah. I will say that's a little bit of sort of obscure look to the ref going, really? 4 times in a row?
It makes you wonder. It makes you wonder. We've spoken about that ad nauseum. People are probably sick of us talking about that, and fair enough too.
No, let's go down that rabbit hole again.
No way. But back to the original point that I said, if you're not putting yourself in those positions, that doesn't happen. And look, I sat down last night, but much to my chagrin, and sat there and sat through the entire game all over again. Now, more often than not, I'll watch parts, or I'll blitz through certain. I always rewatch the game in some capacity, but considering that was such a disappointing and, quite frankly, disappointing, probably the right, just shit house performance by us. And it was only on Sunday night, the night before. I was still dirty. I sat down and watched that game, and unsurprisingly, but also maybe surprisingly, the Dragons, one thing that contributed to that discipline was, once again, like in the trial against the Dragons, we lost the ruck disgustingly. They had our ability to win the wrestling contact was better in the middle against the likes of Molo and Laurie than it was on their outside backs. I get Moses Sully is 107 kilos or whatever he is. So what? So what? People tackle big men all the time. You don't see other teams lose every single ruck just because the bloke is a big-ish centre. What's he giving away? 6 or 7 kilos? So our ability to control the ruck out of the back three was, disgusting, horrible, abhorrent. And that's a big contributing factor in my eyes as to why we probably went down that path of trying to slow it in another way and giving away those penalties. One big thing I really zeroed in on last night that we are awful at is the Dragons on the ground fought for every inch. And the amount of times that they'd roll slightly to the left, or they'd pull our defender just as he's about to go to marker, they'd just push him to the side and then play the ball, or they'd step a half yard to the right or a half yard to the left to get a marker. And Clemmer actually got pinned for it at one situation. I think it was Lomax moved slightly off the mark, put Clemmer slightly out by doing that, and then Clemmer tackled the hooker. The Dragons were fighting for all that stuff. When we had the ball, not only were we not doing that, which meant a play the ball that was slightly slower, but also their markers and their defensive line were set. But we had no ability to control that attacker on the ground. None. The amount of Steph, for example, the amount of times Steph, good first up contact, but gets stuck behind the player as he's coming to his feet. I think I counted 3 or 4 in the space of about 10 minutes in his first stint. I thought, mate, you're a prop. It's not just about the first contact. You've got to hit stick and you've got to manipulate them into that position. Otherwise, you lose the advantage. I couldn't believe it. It nothing I had noticed about him before, and he wasn't the only one. That was a massive contributor. And the reason I go back to saying earlier that it was both surprising and unsurprising is we saw it already happen. So the Dragons just rolled in with the same recipe sheet, basically. And instead of learning from our mistake in the trials, we learned nothing in terms of being able to control their big men, particularly on those first 2 or 3 tackles. Nothing.
I will go down a bit of a rabbit hole there with Steph and just say that was a performance that I didn't think I'd see this year. Every game he's had so far, he's run with intent. He has been aggressive. He has led from the front. That one looked like he was a passenger. He looked like he didn't want to be there. And that's the truth. Like, yeah, he ran that, a great line from a beautiful ball from Abbey. But that's basically all he really did to lead from the front. And even then, it was a pretty easy try for him. I mean, what do we say he was? 6'4", 111 kilos. And, running that hard of the line at a hole when Eisenhuth is clearly turned into Appy. It's a pretty easy try for him to score. But he just didn't. He's been our leader for the better part of, over a month now.
Yeah.
And very comfortably our forward pack leader.
Yeah.
And that just looked like he was, happy to accept a paycheck and get off the field.
Yeah. Look, I will say with him that we've been rightly so, I think, dishing out the praise for him because he's had an awesome start to his year. And he's been super consistent. Every game he's played up until the weekend has been really, really good, right? You agree with that? So,
100%.
So I'm not going to barbecue him over that because you're allowed to have off games. I get that. But I guess it was, if he has an off game, but the rest of the side or 3/4 of the side play all right and the team goes all right, then you don't really notice it as much. But it was just the fact that it stood out, I guess, because it was a big dip on what we had expected. And I would think, if I'm looking at the team sheets, considering how he's played against bigger, stronger, more aggressive packs, in my opinion, I'm not talking about their edges, I'm talking about their centre. Molo's playing okay, but they're pillows, the Dragons middles, in my opinion. They made us look like pillows on the weekend. That's back to what I said earlier. So the fact they were so flat, and the fact they weren't there mentally for the game, or that's what it appeared to be, was puzzling. And the fact that Steph, didn't have the impetus to play the way aggressively and on the front foot that he has been playing the rest of the year was puzzling. I couldn't figure out why. Was he feeling off? Like I said earlier, half joking, half not. Has there been an illness sweep through the camp and they just sort of kept it under wraps? That's what it looked like.
Yeah, it's exactly right. They look like they all had a bit of a, maybe Appy gave them a bit of leftover gastro and they had that all week. That's what it looked like.
Yeah,
they looked like they had no energy, no intent, no aggression. They had no cohesion. To me, at times, it looked like this team had never played with each other. They'd never lined up together. They'd never, done any drills or anything together. It just looked like they were lost, and it was a one-out performance. It wasn't a team performance.
And I think the tone in our voice might seem maybe slightly odd, like justified being frustrated and disappointed. But, we've got an upward inflection. And I think it's because we were almost surprised because that's not what they've shown in any capacity this year. Even against the Dolphins last week, not only us, many people were, I won't say patting them on the back. We lost the game against a beatable opponent, but it was admirable the way against some adversity we came back into that game last week, and we didn't get the chocolates, obviously, but we still showed large chunks of what this side seems to be about this year. In terms of how, as you mentioned, their intent to play this game of football. But on the weekend, as you mentioned, it looked like that many times they hadn't played together with one another, and it just looked like a completely different side. And I think a lot of people in the first 20 minutes, half an hour, not least of all the people that paid their money to get to the ground, were probably just looking around saying, what's going on? This is not the team that we've seen so far this year. It doesn't remotely look like them. Why? What's the reasoning?
And, there's people that's come out and said, because we don't have Galvin, we don't have this. Galvin's an 18-year-old half. He's not, maybe he brings a bit of energy to the team because of his youthfulness. But you need your leaders to stand up. at all times. You need your Appies, you need your Clemmers, and you need your, especially, Steph and Caesar. You need those leaders to stand up, regardless of who's on the field or who's not. And it looked like nobody wanted to put their hand up and lead. And I'm literally sitting there and lumping Appy into this. I think Appy, if I remember correctly, he made 2 very critical errors when we were getting momentum back. Now, that's not like Appy. That's not the Appy that we know.
Yeah.
But instead of, we know that, Appy can make mistakes. Everyone can make mistakes. But Appy does everything he can to make up for that mistake. Everything. I didn't even really see that.
I will say, not to counter you directly, but watching that game again last night, he really worked overtime in that second half. So he tried to put the team on his back. His kick pressure was just out of the blue, and he was the sole one doing it. His chases were way up there. He was getting out of the line with his line speed really noticeably in the second half, as good as we've seen this year in those defensive elements. But like you said, he had a bag. Like you said, what's that?
Too little, too late. A leader doesn't sit there at halftime and say, "Oh, you know what? I think I'll start playing football now." And again, this is not me bagging Appy. I might have started last year, had a bit of an opinion about him and not being the player I thought he was going to be. I've obviously completely 180'd on that. I love Appy. I think he is definitely an amazing player, captain for our club, everything like that. But the thing that frustrated me was, I think I've come to expect the absolute best of Appy every single game. And that was not the Appy I've come to know. That is just more that first half. I obviously didn't rewatch the game like you did.
Yeah.
Because I would have got angry and broken a TV or a screen. So that's, aggression that they should have shown. But what I saw in that first half, it just looked like he was just another player on the field. That's all it was. And like I said, the Appy we've all come to know, that is not Appy. He is not another player on the field. He is a leader. He leads from the front, not physically, obviously, but he leads from the front in terms of his energy and his speed and, his voice and everything.
He had a bad game. He had a bad game. He did. He had a bad game. But he wasn't the only one. And that, like we mentioned with Steph a second ago, on any other given day, if the team plays better on the whole and maybe we get the win, you probably don't notice it as much. But that was another reason we're scratching our heads, because so many people played so poorly. It was evident for anybody watching that so many people in the side just didn't have that intent that we're talking about. So, look, mate, very, very disappointing. But we're allowed to have, we have for a long time had those games. We do have those bad games, and it's very easy with a positive start and a really encouraging start to the season to start to feel as though this is the status quo, and to forget exactly where we're coming from and how long a rebuild. Not that it is a set time, but how large a rebuild this is. And I hate saying it, but we need to expect inconsistency. I think we'd expect inconsistency to be consistent for a little while. It's just, it was a bugger to see. And for me, the Dolphins and the Dragons games, I know they played out differently, but the Dolphins and the Dragons games, I said it last week, they're games that now have gotten away. I think that's 4 points we've really wasted. And I think it was unfortunate how it played out. That's going to happen. That's football. But on the weekend was very, very winnable. I think if we come up against the Dragons later in the year, unless we play as badly as we did, I think we're every chance of pumping them. I don't necessarily mean that we're 50 points to 0 better than them, but I'm saying we can more than match it with that side. To be perfectly honest, I think on our day, or even playing normally, we beat them, particularly without what Lomax is doing. So anyway, mate, we put the feelers out on to the socials a day or so ago and basically just said, barring the inclusions or the expected inclusions, this is before the team list was announced that we'll go through a little bit later. But barring the obvious inclusions of Semwella, Galvin and Bateman coming in, what sort of changes do you think we need to be making heading into the Panthers? And I'm not moving to that game specifically, but just off the back of what we saw against the Dragons, is in what personnel changes specifically. So we've had a few responders we'll go through now. So John has said, we really miss Semwella and Galvin. Bateman is will be great to have back. And Naden might get in for Fatape, which we'll talk on Sol in a minute, as he's had 2 games back in Cup. He's over his HIA. He said he's surprised Clem wasn't suspended. He said he had Semwella starting and Sione on the bench if he's fit. So Latu is back. But Latu's back to 14, which was a good call. And then 12, Seyfarth and Semwella. So quite a bit going on there. A few suggestions, which, as we'll talk about later, came to fruition. David has said, I'd love to see how we use the bench change the most. That's a really good point. We haven't really spoken about Benji's use of the interchange or lack thereof. Appy needs 10 minutes either side of half time. And Josh, I'm assuming he's referring to Folletti. He's really pushing for a centre spot. And Folletti has been playing relatively well in New South Wales Cup. He's got himself a couple of meat pies of late. So Ray's chimed in. He said Naden's a must for Fatape. And Latu, if fit, he'd have him on the bench with Semwella, Twal and Seyfarth. Another good premonition.
Yeah.
And the big change to straighten the attack, which he said Galvin would. And so that's a big one as well, which, whilst it didn't directly cause issues, if we want to talk about our attack, it's another topic we can get to in a little bit. The likes of what Bud did to our attack and Jareem Buller's inability to straighten with the ball is a big problem that's killing those swings. We'll get to that in a minute. So Todd must be a new person on the page. Todd Bierke. Okay. Anyway, thanks for commenting, Todd. Mass changes probably don't need to happen, but just one of those games where the bad habits of old crept in, and a few of us have said that. Mention the fact that it looked like the Tigers have 21, 22, 23, and it's hard to argue. For me, Fatape needs some time in reserves. I keep forgetting he's only on his 3rd NRL game. 4th, I think, Todd, but you might be right. And Naden comes at right centre. Again, quite a few people have picked things pretty well this week. Bud Sullivan isn't playing NRL standard. Leave Simpkin in there or bring De Silva for hooker rotation. I think De Silva's only just returning this week from a lower leg injury, Todd. So I think he's in lower. I think he might be playing flag this week or possibly Cup.
He's 14 for Cup.
Is he 14? Okay, there you go. He's 14 for Cup. Peter mentioned about Benji's bench rotation. The fact Appy's getting flogged. I couldn't agree more, mate. He needs a spell. Bud doesn't deserve to be in the 17, and he wants Naden in if he's fit, as a few people were saying. So the crowd was flat yesterday, just as bad as us. He doesn't get everything to play for, and we deliver that performance. So, yeah, mate, we spoke about that earlier. There's something that's been in that club for a little while in regards to being unable to perform, it seems, at those important times. So, mate, bench rotation. What's going on there? What's doing?
Yeah, I've never really thought about that, hey?
So last week against the Dolphins, neither Capoa nor Simpkin got on the paddock.
Was it Simpkin?
Yeah, I'm pretty certain. Yeah, or was it?
It's Latu. Latu played against the Dolphins.
Yeah, that's right.
He got on and got. So everyone got. I think everyone got a. I don't think. Was Capoa actually in that squad? I don't think Capoa was in that squad. So everyone was. No, because Semwella was in it. He got Capoa replaced Semwella.
Yeah, that's correct.
And Seyfarth was on the bench because Bateman was still in the side. It was I think it was the Sharks game. No, the Parramatta game. Capoa
Parramatta game, was it? So it was the week before that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Parramatta game, Capoa didn't get used.
Yeah.
And this week, Simpkin didn't get used.
Simpkin didn't get used again. Yep.
So
now, I have read a few reports that Appy was told or asked to come off and he refused, which is a leader's knock if true, and that's the case. But at a certain point, you've got to pull rank and say, for the betterment of the game and for your performance at the back end, you need to have a spell mate, even if it's short. And, tell me Jake Simpkin can't hold up his end of the bargain for 10 minutes either side of half time.
100%.
Yeah. So that effectively gives Appy a 30, 40-minute spell with half time as well, which is plenty of time to get back to almost A1 heading into the back end of the game.
Yeah, and that's when, especially if we're playing the way that we were, and we want to get back into the game. We were lucky to only be 6 points down, 12 points down. Excuse me, at halftime.
Yeah.
And if we're chasing again, we need him at his absolute best. So it's. I think there was another. I think it was the same issue in the Newcastle game on the weekend, where for a while there Pongo wasn't running properly, and even Joey can't commentate a Knights game anymore. He's too bleed biased. But Joey was like, the coach has to pull rank. You have to get him off because they will start targeting. And it's the same with Appy. You've got to pull rank. You're the coach. He's not the coach. You've got to do what's best for the team. And I know he's a competitor. He wants to have a captain's knock, and that's fine. But put your ego aside for a sec and think about what's best for the team.
Yeah. Oh, look, I'd love to have 13 Appies out there for 80 minutes. But sometimes that break is, like I said earlier, it's actually
31 years old.
Yeah. And that's the other side too. We don't want to be flogging this bloke. We got him for another 2 years, and we need him for another 2 years. Yeah. If we're going to start to climb this ladder, as we all hope and pray that this is something that's on the way for us in our stars sooner rather than later, we need Appy Coruscant to be at the forefront of that. And if we're flogging him in early 2024, round 6, in those types of situations, either by his own design or the coaches, then we're not going to get the best out of him as he continues to plod along.
Yeah, exactly. And not only do we need him as a player, but we need him to I pray and I hope that there is a position for him somewhere when he retires within the Tigers, whether it's in the coaching staff or what.
Yeah.
Because he needs to be there to mentor the next generation. The TDSs of the imagine having a specific mentor looking after you that has won 3 premierships, that has played Origin, and you're a 19-year-old dummy half. There's nothing better.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. I'm just going to move on. We've spoken about defence. We've spoken about individual performances. We've spoken about the vibe. Marbo.
Yeah.
The whole
Marbo
vibe. Yeah, F3. I changed that tray 3 times.
Such a good move.
Oh, how good the castle, mate. Ripper. Anyway, mate, our attack on the weekend was, I think if I'm being nice, diabolical.
So did we attack on the weekend?
No.
No, okay, cool.
No.
Sorry, was it a blink and I missed it sort of situation?
Yeah. Our attack was diabolical for a number of reasons. And what I don't want to harp on is the helter-skelter. We weren't connected. We've mentioned that. They didn't seem connected. There was no linking. Everybody was all over the shop. People running the wrong lines, getting mixed up, turning around, dummy half turning around with nobody there. It was a dog's breakfast. What I want to focus on, I want to get your thoughts on. One was our kicking game and how we're executing and setting up the kicking game. Aiden Caesar was under the pump with kick pressure, and his kicks were awful. Most of his kicks in that game were disgusting. Yep. The other thing is our inability to straighten the attack, specifically on the weekend. It's been a problem all year. I'm going to talk about the second one, and then we'll see. I'll ask your opinion. Mate, Lachlan Galvin, 18-year-old kid or not, he is what he is. So there's a lot of people that have sort of said, oh, we're relying on him so heavily. Yeah, because he's unreal, and he makes our side better. His ability to straighten the attack has been what we've desperately needed to create some space, even though we may have not capitalised on it. We've certainly had plenty of opportunities of half breaks and breaks, but I think it's actually masked over the cracks with Buller's inability to do the same himself from his fullback sweep position. And I guess by default then, with Lachlan Galvin coming back this week, I think that's going to vastly improve it again. If there's one thing that I could put a slide on Buller in terms of our attack, he is awful awful at knowing how to run those lines. Not only does he not straighten, he actively pushes his support players and his outside men out of space nearly every time. The only time that he looks like a threat is if he steps back off the right or left and tries to poke his nose through, which he oftentimes does.
Yeah, and that's it's something that you've been critical of Buller for ever since not ever since he debuted, but from probably the back end of last year. You said you did sort of say that he was improving slightly, but again, like you said, potentially we thought he was improving because somebody else was actually doing the majority of the work for him and gave him the opportunity to look better than he was. I also will say that the one thing that I thought he was improving on massively was his support game. Didn't seem that much at all again.
Yeah.
So, like I harped on Appy before about having a poor performance. Buller's been one of our best for all year as well, and you put him in the same bucket. It's funny that you say how much Galvin straightens our attack. Another thing that Galvin is he's not afraid. He'll take the bump if needed. That hospital pass that Bud passed to Fatape off that scrum, you heard the commentators say it. Sometimes you've just got to take a bump.
Yeah.
He literally just I just want to get rid of the ball. Didn't straighten, didn't draw in that defender, just wanted to get rid of the ball.
Didn't dig into the line.
No. And that's the thing about Galvin. You got an 18-year-old playing against, adult males who are probably 30 kilos heavier than him. Yeah. He's not afraid of digging into the line. It does help that he's 6'3", but still.
Yeah, there's two main ways you can generally create. There's others obviously, but you can generally create space on those types of swings. One of them is digging into the line, holding up the outside man, which creates that doubt, and so decision making has to happen, and anything can happen from there. And the other one is the ability to draw in the outside man through your run. So rather than straightening and digging, you actually drift right and draw in the outside man for the 2-on-1, creating the space.
Yeah,
I'm starting to the best halves do both, and they do it perfectly. Nathan Cleary can do anything like that, right? But I'm starting to think that whilst Bud doesn't have the skill set in being able to straighten and dig into the line, whereas Galvin has that in spades already as a young kid, you saw with the try to AJ Capoa, he did exactly what I mentioned in the second way, which was he skipped to the outside man, popped a beautiful late ball. Might remember earlier in the year I was talking about that being one of his strengths, his short passing at the line.
Yeah.
And so obviously we saw an example of that, and that was nice ball playing. It was. But we and everybody do and try to gain ascendancy far more often from backline swing plays. And so far more often the skill set that's going to be helpful for a half and almost a requirement if you want to create space is to be able to straighten and dig in. And I think that's one of the major reasons that our backline movements have simply looked better with Galvin in there. Not that there's not multiple ways that you can create space or be elusive, but the fact that he did that one so well.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I agree with a lot of our listeners' comments in the fact that Bud's not up to NRL standards this year. We could see that in the Canberra game, and then obviously he was dropped straight away. He came on for about 10 minutes. I think it was in the Parramatta game. But he's just, he's, whether it's confidence or whether he's been in and out of the Dragons side as well, from first grade to cup. It does make you wonder if he even is an NRL half. If maybe that's not his position. Maybe his position is utility. Maybe his position really is like a Connor Watson. He's just there if you need him. He can fill a lot of areas, but he's a jack of all trades, master of none.
That's funny because we haven't seen a whole lot from Bud or of Bud this year, really. I mean, like I said, we're 5 games in, and even in those 5 games, we've seen snippets. But in some ways, we've also seen enough, and we've seen plenty to form those opinions because he's had, from what I can tell, plenty of opportunity to show a strength that is workable. Okay, so, and we just haven't seen it. It's not the kicking game. His running game's been pretty awful. His pass selection's been bad. his communication with his outside men, having them in the right spots. We've looked clunky. There's nothing that we've seen to work with, and whilst we've had a small sample size in terms of games, we've seen a lot of those examples of it just simply not happening. And it's not like he's not creating, he's only creating 1 out of 4 opportunities and he takes 3 bad options. We're seeing hardly anything. That pass to AJ Capoa was really nice. That's the only thing, as far as I can recall. In some ways, both sides of the ball, but more than just creation that we've really seen.
Yeah, like I think there was potentially one instance against the Dolphins last week as well, where he took the line on and made a nice break. But we're talking about 2 instances that we can remember where him having a positive impact on the game. And unfortunately, I can give you maybe 10 or 15 negative instances that he's had on the game. Instances that had negative impact on the game. And that's, unfortunately, you have to analyze the sample size that you have. And the sample size just does not do him any justice. Now, is he lacking confidence? Is he doing this? Is he doing that? Frankly, we're at that point now where, we need something to work, and we need something to work quickly, because we've still got, 20 rounds left. But if we're going to be sticking with Galvin, we need to get him solidified in the halves. You had your opportunities. You didn't take them. That's the unfortunate thing. You could see that Benji really wanted to give him every opportunity. He showed up to preseason training 2 weeks early. He was, biting for that spot. He trained hard. You can't deny his work ethic. So Benji has said, if you come in, you train hard, you're going to get the opportunity. Benji has given him every opportunity to solidify a spot, and he's let it slip through time and time again. So,
yeah, I think he's going to be, or not, I know he's going to be spending a bit of time in New South Wales Cup, and there's a fair bit to work on, and it looks like there's a fair bit in his way. So I hope he improves, and I hope he starts to bring a skill set that we can use effectively in our side. And he'll get his chance, whether through injury or suspension at some point. He'll get another chance, no doubt. But yeah, at the moment, there's a lot to work on there.
I don't think that the Dragons will take him back either. Like you mentioned before, you think he might go back to Dragons. I think he's another Super League. Who knows? Yeah. He might be another one of those instances that goes back and substitutes for the Panthers and then gets signed by another club again.
Yeah, who knows? But it's very early in the season. But if you're a betting man, we're looking at how many years of his forward does he end up doing? What's his role beyond this year, if there is one? Does he have any likely landing destinations? It like I said, it's early in the year, but we've seen a lot in that time, and it's almost getting to that point. Mate, we'll keep moving on because we are getting a bit long in the tooth. Sol Fautape is just the only other one I really wanted to mention. To me, it looked like your quintessential, I've spent a few weeks or a month in first grade and I look like I need a spell. He was found out, and he was found out in a number of ways. He looks like he needs a spell, and that's not an indictment on him. As I've mentioned many times, I'm a big fan of what we've seen so far. I think there's a lot to work with, and I love his competitive nature. But, mate, he needs to go back to Cup for a little while and have a breather and get his confidence back.
Yeah, and I said it last week on the pod. I was happy with him as our starting centre. I thought he was improving game by game, but I think, unfortunately, he took a little bit of a step back against the Dolphins. I think that, like you said, he was found out a number of times, and he wasn't as impactful with the ball in any way, shape, or form that he has.
Against the Dolphins a week before, or Dragons, the game just gone you're talking about?
Yeah, game. Did I say Dolphins, did I?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I meant the Dragons.
Okay. I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure because I thought that he took a little step back against them as well, in a way. So
I don't like. I feel that
defensively. Sorry, I'm just talking defensively. He was on ball and scored 2 tries. He was good in attack. But anyway, Anything else you wanted to add on him, or just we're in agreement?
No, I'm a little disappointed that he went backwards because, as like you, I've been a big fan of him to start the season. But I actually think going back to Cup will do him the world of good.
Yeah,
you'll see him light up at Cup, and I think it won't be long before we see him back in there.
Yeah, I think so too. Again, these people get their chance, and I think Tupou is the type of player that's shown enough so far this year. Definitely something to work with. I think he's out of the box, albeit a bit shy. Hasn't a lot of ball. I think his attack is NRL ready right now. I just think there's a bit to work on in that regard in terms of his defence. So that's all right. He'll get there, mate. We're going to move on. Disappointing. We had a bad game. Let's hope it's just a one-off. Let's look forward, or look ahead, I should say, to this week in Bathurst against the Panthers. So Saturday afternoon, 3 p.m. We're playing the Panthers. Now, this time last year, we got our first win in driving rain, where Jareem Buller sort of put himself on the scene. But This is our team list, and what was really, really interesting is almost unanimously across all the platforms that I follow, everybody I spoke to, everybody was suggesting the same changes, which was the 3 big ins back in, Sol having a rest, and what was the other one? And Latu coming in as the, if available. And all of them just about happened, mate. So we've got Jareem Buller at fullback, Staines and Tupou on the wings. Brent Naden, I was going to mention, Naden has come in for Tupou. He'll be the other centre with Justin Olam. So we've got Lockie Galvin returning at 5'8". Aiden Caesar is the halfback still. Our front row is the same, with Clemmer being very lucky to get away with what he got away with on the weekend. He is in the front row with Steph, and Api Coruscant is the hooker. Papali'i and Bateman returns on an edge in second row. And then we have Pole once again locking the scrum after what was a quiet game last week, in our opinion.
Yeah.
Our interchange bench, Latu returns from hamstring tightness at number 14. Twal Seyfarth and Semwella returns from HIA as well as a welcome inclusion. The extended bench, or the reserves, is Justin Matamua, Asu Kapoa, who I wouldn't want to mention I thought was good on the weekend. Didn't mention him.
I thought he did well.
I think he had a great game, so good on him for taking a chance and playing well.
I think he was one of our best meter readers too. I think he ran for almost over 150 metres.
Yeah, and he actually looked dangerous on an edge, which was good to see.
Yeah.
Still had his guaranteed drop, but no, he was good. Yeah, they originally said forward pass on commentary, but there was rule to drop that short ball from the other short ball from Bud.
That's right. Yeah.
Matamua as well, I thought was actually impressive. I like what he did when he came on. But we'll keep moving. So Matamua, 18, Capoa, 19. Solomon Alamalo is named in the extended bench at 20. Jake Simpkin, 21. And Sione Fainu at 22, who's returning from a lower leg, foot, ankle injury as well. So good to see him back there. You know what is interesting is that we have all 3 of the Fainu brothers named in the same squad for NRL this week.
Yeah, which has happened before.
No, it hasn't, because it was Latu's debut 2 weeks ago, and Sione's been out. Yeah, so that's nice for the family. And as we saw during the week, they were able to chip in and buy a brand new family home down there. So that's good of the boys as well, looking after mum and dad.
Yeah, I like those boys,
mate. Big ins for me, and I said it this afternoon in our chat, and I know I'm not breaking ground here. I reckon this is the best side we can currently field with the squad that we've got.
Yep.
Just about the strongest. It's probably hard to argue, which is nice to be full strength. I cannot remember, and I'm talking years, the last time that we've been able to field a full strength side. We've been close at times, but knowing this is the best we've got, it feels good in a way, because it knows that there's no excuses.
Well, I think it's also really pleasing that what we think is the strongest side, it seems so does Benji. I think that's really pleasing, because we've gone through multiple coaches who we just have head scratches of how do you pick this player every single time when you have this person waiting in the wings. I don't understand it, don't get it, and obviously it doesn't work for you. But this is what we think, and what a lot of fans, a lot of the collective think is our strongest side by far. And Benji obviously agrees with that, and that's really pleasing. Like, we're probably the best armchair footballers you've ever seen in your life. We have opinions left, right, and centre. But it's safe to say, with how much we analyse the game, we can kind of see a player's strengths and weaknesses and things like that. And it's just, where, like, if this doesn't happen and, like, if this doesn't pull off, then obviously we don't know jack shit about football, which is great. But we're both happy, I think, that Benji has gone the way he has.
Yeah. And whether we're just lucky this week, and like we said, there's a lot of people suggesting similar type changes, whether we're just lucky or whether it's a modern thing, modern coach thing, who knows. Anyway, yeah, very pleasing, mate. A lot of big ins. The obvious ones being Galvin. We've spoken about what he has somewhat surprisingly brought to our side this year when he's been in. He's as Benji said post game last week, he's straight back in. So he wasn't mincing his words, and that's a pretty obvious one, obviously, isn't it? We know what he brings. Mate, Brent Naden, so he comes in for his first game of the year. Officially, he got activated in, I think it was last week, and was not used. That was the other one we were thinking of. There was the other person that wasn't able to be used. Mate, what does he bring out in the centres?
It's been a while since he's played in the centres. That's an interesting one, actually.
At least,
look, if he can
early this year,
if he can actually take note from a younger player in Sam and control those brain explosions, those stupid decisions, what he can bring is another dimension in our attack. We know that he's got a strong upper body. We know that he's got a great fit on him, and we know he has a great right flick on him, right hand flick, because he is on the right side. Yes, whatever side he's on, he's got a great flick.
He's on the right.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I think he can bring. It's just that another dimension. Like, give him a bit of early ball sometimes, and he might be able to create a bit of an overlap through those skills that he has. But again, it comes down to him controlling himself at times.
Yeah, I actually like what he brings in defence as well. I know he's not the best defensive centre. I do like, as you mentioned, all those attributes that make him a good attacking centre. I think actually getting a threat back on the edge out in the three-quarter line is nice because Sol got no ball and so couldn't be a threat. But what it says to me now is that on both sides, both our centres are jammers who can whack. So It doesn't matter which side the playmakers go to when they come up against them. They both know that we jam and jam hard. You don't want to get hit by either of them. We've seen them both lay out players with proper hits. Obviously there is risk that comes with that type of play, but I think the fact that there is that threat there, as we've mentioned with Olam and the way that teams had been attacking certain sides of our defensive line, it presents another dynamic in defence. I like that's what it. In addition to what you said, I like that he brings that with him.
Yeah, and I think that I think he has all the makings of being an absolute gun player if he can just get his head on straight sometimes. And that's that might be a maturity thing. I think he's still only like 25. So
27, 28, I think. But that's still he's still got years left in him. How old's Ben Hunt?
Maturity perspective, you'd hope he'd be there by now, but who knows? So I'd like to see him. Hopefully, the off season he's matured a fair bit and knows how to control that aggression. If not, like I said, just take some tips from Sam. He seems to be doing it very well. So
large skill set too, Naden. We've seen him play in the last couple of weeks in New South Wales Cup, fullback, halfback, 5'8". So he's oops, got me 10. Yeah, mate, he's got quite the skill set and it adds to his attacking prowess. We mentioned Galvin. Galvin brings everything. He brings energy, enthusiasm. He brings the ability to play both sides, continuity, communication. He's good in defence from what we've seen so far, straightens the attack. We know what he brings. Mate, tell me, the inclusion of Sam Weller, you mentioned him before. What does that do to our side? What changes?
It adds a... When the defence is tired, when it's that 25th, 30th minute, and they're tired and he adds that punch that you need at that point in the game. You need that punch. You need that aggression, controlled aggression. You need to have a player that is going to get down and dirty because, defenses are very tight at that point, and that's when those post-contact minutes, that's when those offloads come into play and things like that. So that's what he adds. He adds that punch when we need it.
Yeah, he's an adrenaline shot.
He is.
And we've mentioned before with him, he's not just a Spencer Leniu who is an impact prop, crash and bash and knock a few pins over and scatter to the line. He also has the effort side as well. So he brings the energy, he provides impact, and he is effort on effort on effort like you've never seen. So yeah, huge. I used the word superstar, I think, a week or two back.
Yeah.
Couldn't wrap him enough, and I don't think his out last week was something that was given enough credence as to what we actually lost, which again is remarkable for a bloke who's played less than 10 NRL games and is 20 years of age.
That's the Finu family tree. They're just all football players.
What a family, mate.
Oh, mate.
So, speaking of which, Latu comes back. We know, my stance on Latu and what he's got there. For me, the fact he's in the 14, he's more versatile too. For me, he could play lock. I think he'd be an unreal lock. He can play anywhere in the halves. He could play in the centres if he had to. He could play hooker, and he's dynamic. I liked what I saw out of his defence. How does Benji use him on the weekend?
Well, like all of our listeners have said, you got to give Appy a break. He has to be used at hooker. He played there for Tonga or Samoa. Is it Samoa or Tonga?
Tonga.
So he played there for Tonga. Christian Wolf entrusted him with that. And from everything that I didn't actually watch the game, but everything I heard about that, he didn't look out of place at hooker either.
No.
So he needs to be used there. That's my thought process. He needs to be used there. Good service, play what he sees, and just again give Appy that break that's needed to be the player that we needed to be at the back end of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else you want to mention? Obviously, Johnny Bateman brings the unmentionables. What's that?
Stability.
But yeah, great word. Stability on the edge. I think he's another energy barometer. I think it means that Appy doesn't have to do it all himself in terms of trying to pick the troops up. By example, I think Bateman brings a lot of that. And he's not going to be your Olakawatu bust through the edge and create offloads and havoc. He's not that player. He's not that player anymore. For me, it's just, what he brings in terms of, as you said, stability on that edge, mainly defensively.
Yeah, and he, like I said, he's not that player that, he was in 2019 at Canberra in terms of, chip and chase for himself and have these X factor about him. But I don't think that's why we bought him. We bought him for his leadership, and that's why he was made vice captain.
Yeah.
Obviously, it'd be hard to make him vice captain when he came last year because, he didn't really play till round 5. But he adds... Like you said, Appy doesn't have to put everything on his shoulders anymore. It can be shared with Bateman. And Bateman is just such a talker. And unfortunately, that's one of the things that Appy does kind of lack a little bit, is he's not much of a talker. He leads by doing. Whereas Bateman gets in your ear and just, has a fucking go, which is, you need both.
He'll bark your ear off a bit. It's going to be interesting next year. It's going to be Luai and Bateman in the same team.
You won't be able. No one else will be able to get a bloody word in edgewise.
No, and I think they'll be playing on the same edge too.
Yeah,
the same side.
Yeah. The one thing too that we didn't I don't think we touched on at all, but you did bring it up, was also Caesar's kicking game.
Yeah. Sorry, I never circled back to it. Yeah. But
we don't we won't go too deep into it. But the one thing that Galvin does seem to bring is it seems to give. It means that, from what I can see from outside looking in, Caesar doesn't feel like he has to be both sides of the field. Caesar doesn't feel like he needs to control every aspect of the game. He does his things. He does his things well, and that's what he sticks to. He kicks well. He directs well. He talks well. But he knows he can trust an 18-year-old. And that's the thing that's really, mind-blowing when you think about it. You're talking about a 32-year-old halfback trusting an 18-year-old, 4-game player more so than a 22-year-old half who's been in the game for 4 years. But that's what it does. It creates... It lets Caesar just do the simple things, the little things right. And that's what he focuses on. Whereas he had it's fair to say he had a shocker as well. Everyone had a shocker against Dragons. But I think his was more... probably a little bit more deeper than the others because he is the general, but he felt he also had to just do the other half's job as well because There was no trust.
And again, it's just, again, not to rehash that Dragons game again, but that just reminds me of something. It looked to me like both Caesar and Appy had no trust in Bud in terms of playmaking ability. And so they both looked like Appy looked last year, where he felt as though he had to do everything.
Yeah.
And with that comes overplaying your hand. And, if it's not your day as well, it looks like a series of kicks, for example, that were either rushed because he wasn't in good position, or they just, poor choices. Anyway, mate, let's move on. How do we beat Penrith on the weekend? How do you take them down? No Cleary?
No Cleary. That's a big. For me, I think it is limiting Edwards' impact. I think that when Cleary's not in, you can see that Edwards is one of those fullbacks. Everyone harps on it. Everyone talks about how he was dropped 5-6 years ago to New South Wales Cup and told you have to fight your way back to that position, and then he's become one of the premier fullbacks. But I think one of the biggest reasons he's become that premier fullback is his constant involvement. But he steps that up another gear when Cleary's not in the side. So I think if we can limit him and make it so that, it basically all goes back onto Luai's shoulders. Schneier's there and, he can do a serviceable job, but that it's all going to come off the back of Luai, really, in terms of talk, and you can put pressure on him. It'll go a long way to actually beating the Panthers.
Yeah, I think I agree. I'm also very wary of their hooker, so Mitch Kenny.
Yeah.
Who I think is playing really good football. And with them having Leota and Fisher Harris back now, if we don't control them through the middle there, I think Mitch Kenny can do a fair bit of work. And I think that, as your point to Edwards taking over some of the responsibilities of creating, I think that Kenny will do the same in the absence of Cleary. And I think we've seen that. I haven't seen all the Penrith's games over the last few weeks without Cleary, but I've seen bits and pieces. That's not something that would surprise me if that's the way it goes. So that's, again, another thing we need to be mindful of. Mate, who wins and by how much?
Unfortunately, I think the Panthers will get up in this one. I think that off the back of that performance we put in, I don't think we'll be brimming with confidence. And you need to be confident to beat the Panthers. But I think we'll definitely see an improvement. You got to. You can't really go backwards from that performance. That was probably the worst performance I've seen in a long time. And that's talking about a side that's won 2 wooden spoons. But I think we'll improve. And I think we will improve vastly. I just think that score.
Yeah.
I'm going to go 22-16.
Okay, so a close one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mate, I say we win.
Oh, please. I'm happy with that.
28-18. This is going to be the first game all year we start fast. I think we're going to get out to 10-0, 12-0, 10-0, I'll say, and then we'll, just keep them at arm's length the rest of the game. I think we're just going to play a good game of football.
You think maybe that game against the Dragons was the kick in the arse we needed to start fast?
I just think it was the dip that growing things need from time to time and growing teams need from time to time. I think we'll get right back on track. I think those ins are everything that we lacked in a lot of ways. And I don't think that side will be very happy with what they put out, given that their previous run of games was relatively consistent in their attempt. I think that was an aberration, and I think they'll fix it. 28-18.
Mate, if that's your prediction, I'm all on board for that.
Bold prediction, mate.
I reckon Galvin's going to cross. I reckon he's going to get his first NRL try. I think it's going to be a show and go.
Yep. Okay. Mine is that Steph's going to bounce right back and he's going to take it personally and he's going to get one over Fisher Harris and knock him on his ass or just run over the top of him or something like that.
Yeah, love that.
He's going to dominate.
Love that.
Rightio, mate. Well, that game is at 3 p.m. in Bathurst on Saturday. So if you're not getting out there to the game in Bathurst, from my understanding, I think that the Ambush was organising a bus trip. So if you're not already on that platform, you can be a part of that community. Wonderful stuff over there. Kelly and Gary run that one. So make sure you follow those guys as well. And, mate, speaking of the ambush and all things related to it, we love the West Tigers podcast as well as ours, obviously, Tiger Town. You know, the boys over there have done great stuff for a long time. They're obviously had a big role in the upheaval at the end of last year through the petition that they started. So, yeah, if you're not already following them, I don't know what you're doing with your life. Wonderful stuff. They put out lots of awesome content. Gary just had a chat with the other Gary Banya, who did the review only last week. Wonderful pod episode to listen to as well. So get on over West Tigers podcast. They've also got the West Tigers podcast forum as well, so you can jump on there and have a crack at that one
mate,
too.
They're pioneers.
Yeah, they are, mate. They do it great. As good as us, let's say. Big thanks again to our sponsors, Best on Ground Digital, bestongrounddigital.com, the digital marketing agency that looks after the little guy. Anything digital or marketing or digital marketing related, get on board with them. They're good eggs over there. They will not steer you wrong. bestongrounddigital.com. That's a good rhyme.
Yeah, I didn't even realise that rhymed. There you go, you're a poet. You didn't even know.
Hey, well done. Technically, it doesn't rhyme, but it's very close.
Yeah.
Mate, looking forward to the game on Saturday. High probability that you and I might be watching it together, which we've had a good run. Touch wood, hopefully that maintains. Looking forward to it, mate. Any last thoughts on the upcoming game against the Panthers for round 7?
No, I just want to see us bounce back. That's it. That's all.
Mate, you, I, and everybody out there listening on the airwaves feel the same way. So let's finish up with a mighty go the Tigers.
Come on, you Tigers.